Beef Research School on realagriculture.com is brought to you by the Beef Cattle Research Council.
Well, in swath grazing or in using your second cut hay as a grazing crop, you're reducing fuel costs, probably reducing the amount of fuel used by about a third, certainly reducing the equipment that you would use in harvesting, processing, and so on. And you're probably saving yourself about 40 cents, or rather, I should say 40% of the cost. So if it cost you somewhere around $1.50 a day to overwinter a cow, it's now probably costing you somewhere around $1. There are two aspects to that, at least, and the first is that what we find is that when young cows, like first calf heifers, do their first winter of swath grazing, they have a few problems, and usually that means they may lose some weight compared to older cows. It appears as though they're not ready to graze or follow the grazing routine of their older counterparts, and so it may take them a few weeks to get onto the routine. The other thing is that producers will say to us, my cows won't eat this particular variety of oats. My cows won't eat triticale. Often that comes from the producer having grazed a particular variety or species for a number of years, and the cows are used to grazing that, and they will preferentially graze what they're used to. So when they change, they may notice that cows waste some more. With triticale, we found really no difference than grazing a barley crop. We found about losses in the field of anywhere from about 6 to 20%, and usually a 20% loss is pretty common.
So when producers are selecting a site, either to bale graze or swath graze, there's a number of things that they should keep in mind. First of all, the ability to monitor animals on a regular basis is extremely important to ensure that animals maintain adequate body condition. It's particularly true if we're bale grazing or swath grazing sort of more non-traditional animals, like, for example, lactating cows or cows that are thin, or any animal that might be more difficult in terms of sustaining them from a nutrient perspective. It's also very important to ensure that animals are, that snow accumulation on the site isn't severe, so that the animals can still, for example, access the bales and access the swaths. It is possible sometimes, if we get some crusting occurring, to facilitate that access by running a tractor over top of the snow to break up the crusts. But for the most part, if there is accumulations of probably more than 2 feet, it'll be difficult for a cattle to access the swaths. And therefore, we might want to use those sites either earlier in the fall or later in the spring when the snow isn't as great. The other thing that we really want to keep in mind is the potential because of extreme weather, of supplemental feeding. If we're supplemental feeding using grain, for example, or bringing in additional higher quality hay, then we have to be able to access the site in order to be able to provide that supplemental feed to animals. And the other thing is just consider potential risk with regards to runoff and how that site selection might impact potential runoff from the site. The other and final, probably one of the most important considerations, is just protection for the animals. That could be either by natural protection in terms of bush, but if not, then the need for some kind of a supplemental windbreak or wind fences, portable wind fences, for example. Again, just to ensure that those animals, when the temperature is very cold and when the winds are high, that those animals have some place where they can protect themselves from the wind and from the environment.
One of the benefits that producers notice after bale grazing is an increase in forage productivity. Sometimes it might be suppressed for a short period because of some smothering by leftover forage that's been used for bedding by the cattle, but in most cases after a few months or years they notice an improvement in forage growth, and that's because there's been a lot of nutrients transported to that site, and it really does benefit forage growth. Now, some of the things that people are sometimes concerned about is making sure that they bale graze on tame pasture or tame hayland as opposed to native pasture, because you can introduce a lot of invasive species by accident if you bale graze on native rangeland. Also, some people will bale graze on cultivated annual cropland as a means of restoring soil fertility there as well.
One of the most important things that producers should remember about swath grazing is that for most of the cereal crops we have, the cow does not require to eat to her complete fullness every day. A 1,500 pound cow grazing in triticale or barley may only require 22 to 25 pounds of dry matter per day. And so it's essential to use an electric wire like you see in front of you today. This paddock is getting ready for an experiment to start in 2 or 3 days, so we have it set up. And so we try to estimate how many feet of swath, the number of cows that are needed to graze this. Then they graze down to a certain residue level before they're moved. If you don't use an electric wire and limit graze, you're not going to make very much savings over any other way that you would winter cows. It's essential that they be limit grazed and grazed efficiently.